Good evening, welcome to my channel. My name is David Okun, and thank you everyone who have been helping me, who have been supporting this channel, who have been subscribing to this channel, sharing with family and friends, and actually joining the conversation, the comment box, and clicking a notification bell for new video, for more videos, and also clicking like. And if you are new, subscribe to this channel to support it. We are talking about the cost of living. We have since talked about the cost of living for the last 10 months since we began this program, and we are doing well. We are still a small channel. We are growing gradually but surely, and we have been talking about Africa. Now today we will be talking about East Africa with reference to the cost of living crisis, which is global. The condition of East Africa is similar to one of Africa. If you watch this video, watch the one on Africa, and to figure out what the situation in Africa and in East Africa is like in relation to the cost of living. There is a lot of poverty in Africa. There's a lot of poverty in East Africa, more than anywhere else in the world. And at the same time, some of the poorest, whereas there are some of the poorest individuals in Africa, in East Africa, there are actually some of also the wealthiest in Africa and in East Africa. That is interesting and a source of concern. The cost of living has been created by poverty. And if you work for a living, you are in the lower and the middle class of the worker. You are suffering the cost of living crisis by default. Capitalism produces wealth for the many, for the few, and not for the many. It takes wealth away from the majority of the population. Over 95% of the population gives it into the hands of the few. And if you have to borrow money within the credit economic system to buy property and to pay your children to university, and also buy school uniforms for your children in schools, and also pay school fees, and if you have to complement your income by borrowing to buy a nice car to furnish your home, and sometimes also to buy food and energy and water, then you're poor by definition. If it is necessary for you to do this thing, if you can buy your house outright, especially in the developed world, but also in the developing world, you can build your property without resorting to credit, then probably you are rich. But the measure of wealth actually in dollar, in US dollar, and also if you are actually multi-billionaire and a multi-billionaire, anything less than that should inform you immediately that you are actually a poor person. Okay? It's either poor or rich. There's no middle ground in terms of the cost of living, especially at the crisis. People need to understand that, and people need to know that what causes violence in society is actually failure of culture, which is actually respect for humanity, valuing humanity as a priority. And I'll say this again and again, and I'll continue to say that people need to understand these concepts and apply it into their life. We need to relearn our culture. We need to change the way we think. This is an obligation, it's a moral obligation, because we need peace. Our children are dying on the streets. They are killing each other, they are killing adults, parents and children are killing parents are killing children because of violence, because of cultural malfunction, and because of poor education about humanity. We have failed as a society to value humanity as our priority. In many parts of the world, especially in big cities and towns, we are increasingly referring to fellow humans as strangers. We should never be strangers in any way. We should always be there as our brothers and sisters keepers. That's the way to building peace. The cost of living as a crisis is an evidence of violence, failure to produce peace in society. And government should rethink policies, especially in terms of capitalism, in terms of the economy. Government should actually pay more attention to the public sector. Public sector may sound like a terrible thing to many people, but it is the only way there can be social justice in the world. Because you see, poor people are permanently trapped. People keep dreaming that they're going to get out of poverty and become rich. You will never ever get out of poverty in the modern society, because the modern society is so complex, it's so advanced, it's so scientific in the way it is run. If you're poor, you're just going to be poor. You may, if you're lucky, get out of poverty, but that is a long journey to get out of poverty. It is now increasingly becoming impossible to get even out of poverty, because if you're small and medium businesses, you cannot survive anymore, because the market system is like a jungle. It's like a jungle, survival of the fittest. And if you are the bigger and the stronger, the more powerful you are in the jungle, you're a survivor. You will survive the small people and the small animals within the jungle. If you're small, you're just a sitting duck. You are a predator. You're prey for a predator. And that's actually the predicament of the majority of the population within the market economic system. They are sitting duck. The big giants in the jungle of the market economy are actually vicious and extremely effective predators. They feed on the little people, and the little people, incidentally, are the majority. That means extinction in terms of predictability for the future of humanity. People are going to be extinct. The big giants and multimillionaires are going to destroy the smaller poor people, the lower in the middle classes. They're going to be destroyed. Sooner or later, middle classes are going to disappear, because that's happening now with the small and medium businesses. They're disappearing, they're being closed down. We show the rise and the closure of small and medium businesses during the COVID-19 crisis. And it is continuing now with the cost of living, the current cost of living crisis. And do not think it is a joke. Take your life seriously in terms of this issue. Learn, and read, listen to videos which are actually educational. You can stop and take time away to dance, sing, visit, go to party, go to dinner, go on holiday. It is your life. Life is holistic. Do this thing, but focus on hard work. You need to work really hard, especially if you're poor and you are also a middle class worker. Work as hard as you can. Learn as much as you can about money, income, debt, and the credit system. Try your best to avoid the credit system. But in terms of investment, like in property, the credit system has an inevitability. You cannot do without a credit system, and you need to borrow money to buy a house. If you're renting it, or you want to live in it, or you buy a house and actually redevelop it or refurbish it or whatever you do with it and sell it on, such a business you will need a mortgage in most cases, in most countries. And do not neglect the credit system now, because that is the reality. But in the future, ideally, the credit system needs to be scrapped, because it is a trap for the majority of the population. Multimillionaires and millionaires have the luxury. It's actually, the credit system is for the rich and the mega rich, because they borrow money, say for example, for 5% and lend it and maybe 7%. They borrow more money for maybe 2 or 3% and lend it at 5%. They make 2 or 3% on maybe 10 million or 5 billion US dollar, and do the maths, and they do that and you don't charge any work, you just create money. And that is a good valuation of our developmental existence. But in terms of cultural existence, that is no valuation at all. That is a depravity, and it is being criticized culturally. But you can complement it developmentally, because you need to be smart with money and wealth in order to stay above the rest. And we need to reconcile development and culture, wealth and humanity, and make sure it is a healthy balance going forward. because see, as humans, we need to exercise some element of morality. Extreme immorality will dehumanize us, and when we're dehumanized, we turn into worse than wild animal beasts. We as humans are civilized, brutal, jungle-like, jungle-like marketeers, living wild in the jungle of the market, notwithstanding the government actually, is regulating the market system, allowing these marketeers to behave worse than wild animals in terms of viciousness, in terms of competitiveness, which competitiveness in itself is not a bad thing. But if it is done deprived of any sense of valuing humanity, then it becomes really like a monstrous kind of kingdom, where wild beasts, dangerous wild beasts, devour humanity and will. And we cannot live like that because it's unsustainable in terms of humanitarianism. Humanity are going to go extinct. I keep saying this over and over again. Let us look at East Africa and see what we have. It's very similar to what we had in Africa. If you watch the video on Africa, I'll link it with the cost of living crisis, and then leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. And East Africa, like Africa, have sovereign states and other states which are actually dependent on their territories. And there are between 11 and 19 sovereign states in East Africa. And there is one de facto state. Leave a comment below if you know a de facto state. What a de facto state is. It's a state, but not a state entirely. There are territories which are dependent territories, between 0 and 2 of them. And there are internal territories, which is 1 and 3%. I'll leave a comment below if you know anything about territories which are dependent, which are internal. And the time zone is UTC plus 02, and time zones are UTC plus 03 and UTC plus 04. Leave a comment below if you understand those things technically in detail. And East Africa and Eastern Africa, or East of Africa, is the eastern sub-region of the African continent. And in the United Nations Statistic Division scheme of the geographic region 10, 11, and 16 territories make up the East Africa. Scientific consensus states the region of East Africa is where anatomically modern humans first evolved circa 200,000 years ago before migrating northwards out of Africa. And due to the historical Omani Empire and colonial territories of the British East Africa Protectorate and East German Africa, the term East Africa is often, especially in the English language, used to especially refer to the area now comprising the 3 countries of Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. These were the original East African countries, Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. However, this has never been the convention in many other languages, where the term generally had a wider, strictly geographical context, and therefore typically included Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia. And Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and South Sudan are members of the East African Community as of current. And this is the expanded East African Community as part of the African Union. Actually, the place is actually East African Union. As a unity of the East African region. And Burundi and Rwanda are at times also considered to be part of Central Africa. Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia are collectively known as the Horn of Africa. The area is the easternmost projection of the African continent. Socotra, a governorate of Yemen located in the Indian Ocean. Comoros, Mauritius, and Seychelles, small island nations in the Indian Ocean. These are some of the territories associated with East Africa. Reunion, Mayotte, geographically part of the Comoro Highlands and the scattered islands in the Indian Ocean, French overseas territories also in the Indian Ocean. Mozambique and Madagascar, often considered part of Southern Africa, on the eastern side of the subcontinent. So the fluidity of defining boundaries and locations of nations of East Africa. Madagascar has close cultural ties to both Southeast Asia and East Africa and the islands of the Indian Ocean. In Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, often also included in Southern Africa and formerly constituted the Central African Federation, also Rhodesia and Nyasaland. South Sudan and Sudan are collectively part of the Nile Valley. They are situated in the northeastern portion of the continent. There are also members of the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, free trade area. These are actually units of regionalization of Africa and particularly East Africa, also to prepare Africa and East Africa and the rest of Africa as such for what is to become the union of the globe, also known as globalization. Let's look at geography and climate, which is quite similar to what we saw when we were talking about Africa. So we look at the region between Lake Victoria on the right and the Lake Edwards and Kivu and Tanganyika from north to south, showing dense vegetation, bright green and violet. These are actually looking at the map, but what matters is really to portray Africa in its own richness, in its own essence, in terms of nature, in terms of the environment, in terms of natural resources. Africa, including East Africa, is one of the richest parts of the globe. And East Africa is actually also, especially Tanzania and Uganda and the Congo, are actually crossed by the equator being an imaginary line, been pointing to region of the world, what we call the equatorial belts, going from Tanzania, Uganda, the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa, but also out of Africa, northern Brazil, the Amazon belts, the Amazon basin. These are by description and also by survey among the wealthiest on earth, and we are looking in Africa, looking at the Congo to see, these areas are known generally as the River Lake region. They are littered literally with fresh waters in rivers and lakes, like Lake Victoria, Lake Kyoga, Lake George, and all these other lakes and rivers in Uganda, in Kenya, and Tanzania, and the Congo, and different parts of Africa, but we're looking at East Africa. Some parts of East Africa have been renowned for their concentrations of wild animals, such as Big Five, the elephant, buffalo, lion, black rhinoceros, and the leopard, though populations have been declining under increased stress in recent times, particularly those of the rhino and elephant. Rhino and elephants are at risk because of their tusks. Their tusks are pushing part of their horn. And these are actually treasures. They represent wealth because people want like them, people with money, rich people. So the theoretical Africa could... I don't see why Africa should not breed more elephants for their tusks. rhinos. Instead, you have foreign powers, especially colluding with African leaders, to prevent people from selling this product. This is wrong because Africa, these are African treasures. Africans should be able to benefit from it, to sell it. That should not be illegalized. Because you see, there are technology, animal technology, especially, and science. Africa can now, in every family, in every community, there would be ranches or even parks, or individual, privately owned parks, African owned land. They should be breeding rhinoceros, and they should be breeding leopard for their skin and other products. They should be breeding elephant for their tusks, and buffaloes for other purposes, for meat, and for working in the field, carrying loads. Buffaloes can actually, they can draw plow for plowing, for farming, for cultivating, and they are so strong, and their meat can be eaten. Africa should not have poverty at all, because it's because of cultural violence, and that we even mention the cost of living in Africa. These are a continent where sometimes wild fruits grow wild in the wilderness, in the bushes. Africa can now be focusing on domesticating a lot of animals, poultry, a lot of fruits and vegetables from the bushes, and creating farms, fruits, orchards, vegetable patches. There is no mentioning Africa realistically that Africa is poor. Africa should be the world basket, the food basket of the world, as it were. So I'll continue looking at elements of Africa while continuing also to illustrate the matter of the cost of living and the geographical of East Africa is often stunning and scenic, shaped by global plate tectonic forces that have created the East African Rim. And East Africa is the site of Mount Kilimanjaro and Mount Kenya, the two tallest peaks in Africa. It also includes the world's second largest freshwater Lake Victoria, and the world's second deepest lake, Lake Tanganyika. The climate of East Africa is rather atypical of the equatorial regions. It is generally arid and semi-arid, with rainfall totals across much of the lowland regions below 600 millimeters per year. This may or may not be very accurate, but perhaps also now increasingly accurate because of climate change. And climate change needs to be looked at critically, especially in relation to Africa. The Sahara Desert is a gross indictment on Africa as a continent, with modern technology and such as seen being applied in countries like Israel. Africa should now be experiencing a process of desertification by method of regeneration, environmental regeneration, like irrigation, planting trees which are actually drought resistant, and this exercise should be comprehensively undertaken at a global level. America, Europe, Asia, all these big continents should congregate on African Sahara Desert to desertify, to kind of like make Africa a better area environmentally. I believe things like allowing Sahara Desert to consume Africa is a conspiracy by evil people who have power. When I say evil, I precisely mean people who have really lost track of humanity as something to be valued and as something to be prioritized. And I talk about cultural learning. And if you are evil, it means you are culturally really depraved, because you are so uneducated culturally. and this has to change, especially if they're in a position of power. And formation is actually culture. For those who are actually multi-millionaire, and also people who are actually very poor, because we are actually similar or even the same. I'm not trying to suggest that there's been something intrinsically wrong with rich people because they are culturally uneducated. Cultural uneducation is now the problem facing humanity as a whole. So to have peace among the rich, among the poor, we need to have a good cultural education. So in fact, on the coast of Somalia, many years can go by without any rain whatsoever. And this is to talk of, because you see, East Africa has also been expanded. It used not to be like East Africa used to be is Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. Uganda and Kenya actually receive a lot of rainfall, so that could have improved the accuracy of representing East Africa in terms of climate, outlook, climatic outlook. And so the causes of the low rainfall totals are not fully understood. And that is a problem because we are very modern as a society. We need to know why the climate change, especially if you're in Africa, we need to understand these things. Because there are so many conspiracies going around that some violent human beings with a lot of power are conspiring actually to humanize the climate, using things like desertification as a weapon to destroy humanity. And it is not difficult to understand some of these conspiracy theories, whatever they are, because there are so many, spooky things happening around the world. And in my opinion, we need to really examine the way we do society, especially within government policy and also practices involving matters of, not least matters of the environment. And we need to really look at this thing and try to honestly take more control of our life, and so that we know what is happening in our world, because those in power have actually shut the door. Whatever they do it behind the scenes, and we will never know. And if they are monsters, then we are in serious trouble. And if they are just confused and really allowing people to suffer because of confusion, then maybe when the confusion goes for the super millionaires and super billionaires, multi-millionaires, and if that changes, if it changes where people in wealth and power are actually sane people who are culturally educated, if that is the case, then we should trust them in our lives. We should give them a breathing space to do their work behind the scenes. But if they're monsters, if they're culturally really depraved and extremely violent people who are actually untrustworthy, then we cannot afford to allow them to work in secret. Their secrets should be blown open, and they should be removed from the estate in power. I don't know how to do that, but if we know the problem, there is nothing impossible. We can remove these people and replace them with real humans. So the second cause of the presence of east to west river valleys in the East African Rift, which channels strong, moist, laden wind from the Indian Ocean away from East Africa and toward the Congo Basin forest. So we blame it on nature then, in one way or the other. Why the problem do with drought. Elsewhere, as we will see, elsewhere the annual rainfall generally increases toward the south, and with the altitude being around 400 millimeter, 15 inches in Mogadishu, and 1,200 millimeter, 47 inches at Mombasa on the coast. While Ireland, it increases from around 130 millimeter, 5 inches, at Galway to have a 1,100 millimeter, 43 inches in Moshi near Kilimanjaro. So this is some of the description about the natural environmental outlook of East Africa. Most of the rainfall in two distinct wet seasons, and one centered on April and the other in October or November. This is usually attributed to the passage of the intertropical convergence zone across the region in those months, but it may also be analogous to the autumn monsoon rains of part of Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and the Brazilian Nordeste. West of the Rwenzori and Ethiopian islands, the rainfall pattern is more typically tropical, with rain throughout the year near the equator, and a single wet season in most of the Ethiopian highlands from June to September, contracting to July and August around Asmara. Annual rainfall here ranges from over 1,600 millimeters to 63 inches on the western slope, to around 1,250 millimeters, 49 inches at Addis Ababa, and 550 millimeters, 22 inches at Asmara. Rainfall in East Africa is characterized by two main rainfall seasons: the long rains from March to May, and the short rains from October to December. These may vary depending on part on where you are in East Africa. But the feedback on the ground in East Africa, in many parts of Africa, is that there is less and less rainfall, and they are less and less regular, and they are more less and less certain as such. And this is actually disturbing cultivation pattern and also activities, and actually is contributing directly or indirectly to the impoverishment of the African people, especially those, the majority who are actually workers, who most of them actually grow their own, cultivate their own food, and also a lot of people, a lot of activity within different communities involve agriculture, coffee, tea, and all those bananas, all these other cash and food crop products for sale and for actually domestic use for consumption. And the combination of these actually points to why, in part, why there is increasing poverty in Africa. The solution is actually the government intervening as always, because the governments are the ones running the world, including in East Africa, especially in the respective countries in Africa. The people of Africa, or people of Africa, are not, the people of the world are not necessarily free. You are only free if you know who rules over you. As long as there is a governance, people who actually conduct the law and the rules, policies, and compliance, things like that. As long as they're still there, nobody is free. And so, to the extent that people are free, they also rely on the state to provide for them. And there is a proposal, which is, I believe, is really false, that people should no longer rely on the government. If the government do not want people to rely on them, they should shut down so that people can do what they like. They should shut the legal system down. They should just walk away and leave people to run their own life. You cannot, if you're a state, you cannot have your pet eaten. And this ridiculous attitude of the state now, where they actually function to take away wealth from the many and give it to the poor. They're there to supervise capitalism, which is actually has turned into a brutal nightmare. It's actually a very barbaric system, untamed by any cultural input, where people are actually prioritized, over wealth and power. I've said this before, I keep on saying it again. It needs to change. The only source of making peace, or any chance of peace, we need to change our culture. And rainfall variability is influenced by both El Nino events and a positive Indian Ocean dipole. El Nino events tend to increase rainfall except in the northern and western parts of the Ethiopian and Eritrean islands, where they produce drought and poor Nile floods. Similarly, a positive Indian Ocean dipole results in the warm sea surface temperatures of the coast of East Africa and lead to increased rainfall over East Africa. Temperatures in East Africa, except on the hot and generally humid coastal belts, are moderate, with maxima of around 35 degrees Celsius, 77 degrees Fahrenheit, and a minima of 15 degrees Celsius and 59 degrees Celsius at an altitude of 1,500 meters, 4,971 feet. At altitude of above 2,500 meters, 8,202 feet, frosts are commonly during the dry season, and maxima typically of about 21 degrees Celsius, 7 degrees Fahrenheit or less. The unique geography and apparent suitability of farming made East Africa a target for European exploration, exploitation and colonization in the 19th century. Today, tourism is an important part of the economies of Kenya, Tanzania, Seychelles, and Uganda. The easternmost point of the continent that is Ras Afun in Somalia is the archaeological, historical, and economical importance. Let's look at the history of East Africa and of Sub-Saharan Africa, East Africa, African empires, and East Africa, and a list of kingdoms in pre-colonial Africa and East Africa. Let us look at the prehistory of Africa, prehistoric East African, recent African origin of modern humans. In other words, the East Africa, more than anywhere else in Africa, is responsible for Africa being described as the cradle of humanity. In other words, because of East Africa is the cradle of humanity. East Africa being in Africa, therefore, Africa now is recognized as the source of the original modern humanity. And this is important in East Africa and Africa, because we deserve more from the world, and we deserve more from ourselves, and we are down to improving our culture in Africa and East Africa, to recognize our value as humans in Africa, and also to campaign to the rest of the world to acknowledge Africa, and not to avoid practicing the kind of extreme violence against Africa like we have seen, where Africa now potentially is facing extinction. And we have to really let the world know, in case they are not really aware. So according to the theory of the recent African origin of modern humans, they predominantly held belief among most archaeologists East Africa, in the area of the African Great Lakes, is where anatomically modern humans first appeared. There are different theories on whether there was a single exodus or several or multiple dispersal model involved the southern dispersal theory. So some researchers have suggested that North Africa was the region of Africa from which modern humans who first trekked out of the continent. One way or the other, Africa remains to this day on record the cradle of humanity. This may change in the future with maybe new discoveries, but also maybe with increase in corruption within the research infrastructure of the world. According to both genetical and fossil evidence, it has been posited that archaic Homo sapiens evolved into anatomically modern humans in the Horn of Africa around 200,000 years ago, and dispersed from there. I don't think genetics has been able to prove evolution, so I think that statement is wrong, and it has to be investigated independently, because my understanding is that genetics, but nothing has proved. Even the theory of evolution actually is a theory. Like, there's no evidence that there is evolution. Evolution exists. Evolution actually doesn't exist at all in the Darwinian theory context. We don't evolve from one animal to another. Species don't jump. Creatures don't jump species barrier. That is a fact. So how can evolution? Some evolutionary theories are saying evolution has stopped. What stopped it? And it did stop. Are we stopped from evolving into some other animals or some other creatures as humans? Or what has happened to the monkeys, which suddenly stopped evolving into humans or anything like that? And we remember that when the white people went to Africa, they referred to Africa as monkey. Even today, when they want to be derogatory to Africans, they refer to black people as monkey. And this is actually a violent colonial and imperialistic mentality from white people who went and conquered Africa. And this is a cultural rottenness which should stop. And it's a mentality where Africans are justified, it is being justified to abuse Africa by white countries, which are actually, when I talk about white people, I talk about the developed world, which are actually evidently white. For some reason, the only developed world are actually white world. And although there are some element of, settling down into Africa now, wherever you find power and wealth, and extreme power and extreme wealth, and also violence to accompany it, is more likely going to be white countries. I'm not saying white people are more violent than black people. They're just richer than black people. And where there is wealth, there is more violence. That's why white people are more violent than black people, because they are richer. That's all I'm trying to say. And the recognition of Homo sapiens, down to Homo whatever. So I'm not really very keen on the idea that humans life evolved. So I believe life is created. So I'm very negative this inclined. The recognition of Homo sapiens down to Homo kiddish is automatically modern humans would justify the description of contemporary humans with the subspecies, named Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens sapiens. Because of their unlimited and unique physical characteristics, Idaltu and Kibit represent the immediate ancestors of anatomically modern humans, as suggested by the Out of Africa theory. This is not to my liking at all. I've never been a believer of evolution, because I think it is false. I think it is really corrupt. I think it's depraved. People, evolutionary biologists should be ashamed of themselves, because it's the worst form of scientific lies in decades. How can you talk about a theory which has never been proven? There is not a trace of evidence that anything evolved from anything else. Nowhere. And that is the biggest scientific fraud of any time of progress, or whatever you want to call it. And people, those creatures may be discovered, but it is because of lunacy within the scientific community. I didn't call it the form of the evidence of evolution. No, those are distinctive creatures who existed as those creatures. The fact that they are no longer around because they have gone extinct. there's evidence of extinction more than evolution. And now, with a lot of violence against humanity are actually destined to extinction. We are destined to extinction ourselves. So the Bab el-Mandeb crossing in the Red Sea, now some 12 miles, 19 kilometer wide, narrow in prehistory. It is some of the places, the very ancient coast in 2017 finds of modern human remains dating to ca 300,000 years ago in Jebel Erod in Morocco, suggested that modern humans arose earlier and possibly in a larger area of Africa than previously thought. East Africa is one of the earliest regions where Homo sapiens are believed to have lived. Evidence now was found in 2018 dating to about 320,000 years ago at the Kenyan site of Ologesile of the early emergence of modern behaviors associated with Homo sapiens, including long-distance trade network involving goods such as obsidian and the use of pigments and the possible making of projectile points. It is observed by the authors of three 2018 studies on the site that the evidence of this behavior is approximately contemporary to the earliest known Homo sapiens fossil remains from Africa, such as the Jebel Irhoud and Florisbad, and they suggest that complex and modern behaviors had already begun in Africa around the time of the emergence of Homo sapiens. In September 2019, scientists reported that the computerized determination based on 260 CT scans of a virtual skull shape of the last common human ancestor to modern humans' age. Human ancestors were actually human, and they are still human. They didn't evolve from something, and that's something I would always dispute. So the Homo sapiens representative of the earliest Homo sapiens and suggested that Homo sapiens arose between 350,000 and 260,000 years ago through the merging of population in South and East Africa. The migration routes of the out of Africa theory probably occurred in East Africa, however, through Bab el-Mandeb. Today at the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, the Red Sea is about 12 miles, 19 kilometers wide, but 50,000 years ago it was much narrower and sea level was 70 meters lower. Though the straits were never completely closed, there may have been islands in between which could be reached using simple rafts. Some of the earliest hominin skeletal remains have been found in the wider region, including fossils discovered in the Awash Valley of Ethiopia, as well as the Kobe Flora in Kenya and Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. The southern part of East Africa was occupied until recent times by Caucasian hunter-gatherers, whereas in the Ethiopian islands, the donkey and such crop plants as steppe allowed the beginning of agriculture around 7,000 BCE. Lowland barriers and diseases carried by the tsetse fly, however, prevented the donkey and agriculture from spreading southwards. Lowland only in quite recent times as agriculture spread to the more humid regions south of the equator through the spread of cattle, sheep, and crops such as millets. Language distribution suggests that this most likely occurred from Sudan into the African Great Lakes region, since the Nilotic languages spoken by these Pre-Bantu farmers are their closest relative in the Middle Nile Basin. We are going to stop this video here tonight, and thank you for watching this video about East Africa. It's quite similar to the story of Africa. We are trying to link this to the cost of living crisis, and we are looking at this information because we are trying to establish Africa is a normal place as a continent, and also a subcontinent of East Africa. They are normal places. They are probably more than normal because there is a lot of potential. There is a lot of everything we need to survive, or even to exist, or even to develop, or even to prosper as a human being. So it is a mistake or human misconduct. A mistake resulting from the misconduct of humanity that we find the cost of living crisis anywhere, not least in Africa and East Africa. We will continue with these discourses, and subscribe to this channel, support it, share, watch and share with family and friends, and click the notification bell. Leave a comment below if you like it, if you feel it should be improved. And thank you so much. See you in the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.